The new Saudi Arabia heavyweight undisputed boxing bout is nonsense. Let's get into it. Hello, welcome to On Me Head Son. I hope you're all well. If you like what I do here, don't forget to like and share the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notifications bell for all future videos. And go check out the RevelatorAlf podcast on Spotify as well. So, the undisputed heavyweight bout that has been announced by Saudi Arabia, by Turki Al-Sheikh, the head of the GEA, and thank you for the prince, and thank you for the prince, and all the thank yous that go along with that. He's announced that after the Francis Ngannou AJ fight, after the Tyson Fury-Usyk fight, of course, the winners will fight each other in the undisputed bout. And they've made a bout, right? The undisputed bout. Now, let me just say this before all those people out there start accusing me of being negative and I should be more respectful and all this kind of stuff. It's just absolute nonsense, right? I'm not criticising Saudi Arabia at all for putting on these fights. I question, is it good for boxing? I question what's going to be left in the wake of what they're doing. But in terms of getting these fights on, great, no problem. In fact, these are the fights that we've always wanted to see. They're throwing money at it to say, look, take money out of the question, you're going to fight, and we want you to fight. So basically, that's it. I've always said that the Saudi Arabia putting on these fights, putting on these events now for Riyadh season, it's all about self-promotion. They are promoting their country, of course. There's nothing wrong with that. But this is what they're doing, because there have been some reports this week, or some questions, or maybe some wishes from people out there, YouTube accounts or commentators or whatever. So, well, maybe Saudi Arabia would sponsor these events in the UK to have them at stadiums, because the criticism of the events in Saudi Arabia is that the crowd is very, very flat. There's not a lot of atmosphere there from the crowd, and they're not big, huge crowds either. Whereas you could have an 80,000 stadium, let's say at Wembley or whatever, and it will be packed and the atmosphere would be amazing. The problem is, again, it goes against the whole purpose of these events. It's to promote Saudi Arabia, right? So why would they take it to the UK or any other country? It might happen. I'm not saying it won't, but that's that being said. Anyway, let's get back to the point. The point is that they've created this undisputed bout, and very nice it looks too, right? If you like that kind of thing. But the problem is here. They've announced it during the AJ Ngannou press conference. So Al-Sheikh basically said, look, and he really threw Ngannou under the bus here. And you know what? People are criticizing me for, ramming down on Ngannou. But, I don't. I'm just calling it as it is. But for me, I think if I was in Ngannou's shoes, I'd be like, well, fuck you too, mate. What's all this about? He basically says to Ngannou, I don't want you to win. I treat you like a brother, but I don't want you to win. Well, thanks very much. Because what he's saying is he wants AJ to fight Fury. Now, I've seen the interview with Turki Al-Sheikh, and I can see where he's coming from. He just wants to deliver the best fights, or the fights that we've always wanted, right? The fights that we've always wanted. We've always wanted to see AJ and Tyson Fury, right? Maybe from the UK perspective, granted, right? We've always wanted to see AJ against Wilder. That hasn't happened yet. But, we're getting the fights that we've always wanted. So I can see what he's saying. If Fury comes through from Usyk, if AJ comes through against Ngannou, big ifs, of course, then this is the undisputed that we want. Great. So on paper, this seems like a really good idea. They're throwing money at it. Let's forget about the legacy. Let's forget about the aftermath of, when they start putting their money to other things. Let's just forget about the unrealistic expectations that a lot of fighters are going to be holding out for, the kind of money that they're going to be holding out for. Some fighters have been doing it for a couple of years now. The likes of Andy Ruiz. Andy Ruiz has come in for a lot of criticism for the last couple of years. So, you should have fought, and you're just asking too much money. You're overvaluing yourself. And the problem is with the Saudi Arabia money and their model of putting on fights, they're overvaluing the fighters, or the fighters are overvaluing themselves, I should say. But again, that's not a criticism, because they're prize fighters. They're going for where the money is. I'm just concerned about, and I suppose a lot of people are concerned about, what's going to happen 2 or 3 years down the line. Right. So we're getting the best fights. Saudi Arabia, thanks very much, right? Thank you. You're getting all the best fights. We're getting Ngannou against AJ. And we're hoping, well, this is Turkey Al-Sheikh, we're hoping that AJ wins, right? I don't think it's as clear cut as that. And I think I've got a good feeling Ngannou's going to win this as well, because I saw them side by side. And, as a lot of people thought, God, look at the size of that beast, right? But look, he should, on paper, beat Ngannou, right? In terms of boxing prowess. It's not about fighting. This is about the sport of boxing. Can he do it? Can Ngannou raise his game to overcome AJ? And I think all Ngannou has to do is stand his ground and hit him and catch him a few times. And that's what he's hoping for. Can he test that chin to beat AJ? I'm not so sure he'll be able to do that, but, we'll soon find out, won't we? But Turkey Al-Sheikh doesn't want Ngannou to win. I'm kind of thinking maybe we should all start supporting Ngannou now, just so it kind of throws a big spanner in the works. Okay, so he wants AJ to win so he can fight Tyson Fury, right? But the same breath, or, in this interview, he's saying, well, Fury against Usyk, there's a rematch clause, and there's possibly a rematch clause, or we want to see Ngannou and Fury again. And I said, well, hold on a minute. You're all over the place here a little bit. You're kind of saying, well, the Undisputed is going to be AJ if he wins and Fury if he wins against each other. That's the Undisputed bout, right? But you're also saying that there's all these other fights that are going to happen. Well, when are they going to happen? You can't have all these heavyweight fights happening in the same year. It's just not feasible. It's just not going to happen. Now, are we talking about AJ against Fury as the first Undisputed, and then the winner just keeps on having undisputed bouts, right? Or undisputed fights, right? Okay, that could kind of work. I could see that. Tyson Fury versus Usyk 2 for another Undisputed. Tyson Fury, if he wins, keeps on winning, of course, against Ngannou for another Undisputed. Yeah, okay. The spanner in the works here is if Ngannou wins and if Usyk wins, will there be an appetite around the world or from Saudi Arabia to put that fight on as an Undisputed? Well, they've kind of nailed their flag to the mast here, haven't they? They've said we want this Undisputed, and the winner faces the winner. They want AJ against Fury, but what about if Ngannou is quite likely he could win? It's not beyond the realms of possibility. And Usyk, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that he could win as well. Personally, my feeling is that Fury will win quite comfortably, and I think AJ will win, and it will be a struggle. It'll be a struggle to beat Ngannou, but that's my feeling. But listen, if they get it on and they put on this Undisputed fight, fantastic, right? Love it. But the ultimate point here that I want to make, and this is why it's nonsense, and I've said it's kind of nonsense because there's lots of variables here. There's lots of things of, it's all well and good saying, well, this is my wish list, this is what I'm going to pay to have. But to actually happen, two different things, right? But that being said, okay, fine, this is what you want. And if everything falls into line, yeah, we could get this Undisputed bout fight to go on. Now, I've been really surprised ever since the AJ Ngannou press conference that nobody has mentioned this. None of the boxing socials, none of the boxing media that I'm aware of. Okay, I'm not saying it hasn't happened. None of the boxing commentators. A few have come very close to it, but they haven't actually said anything about it, right? So if they have, or others have, great. They're obviously thinking like I'm thinking, right? So this is the ultimate nonsense of this Undisputed bout. The Undisputed bout, right, is only sanctioned, or the Undisputed fight, I should say, is only sanctioned by the four major sanctioning bodies: WBC, WBA, IBF, and WBO, right? Those are the four sanctioning bodies that have to approve the fight. Now, you could argue, of course they're going to approve the fight because of the multi-million fight deal that's going to be had. They're going to get their percentage. Of course they are. But there's one sanctioning body that has a history of, let's just say, spoiling the party or disrupting the undisputed crowns. And that's the IBF. The IBF regularly do this. Well, I wouldn't say regularly, but they do this with a certain amount of regularity, where they've got an undisputed champion, and he doesn't have the time frame, or she doesn't have the time frame to fight the mandatory opponent within the IBF rankings. Therefore, they are forced to vacate the bout so that within their time frame and within their policy and their procedure and within their structure, they can have a brand new world champion, right? That's what happens. So from one hand, they're kind of disrupting the whole undisputed crown, but the other hand, they're saying, no, you have to fight the mandatory. The mandatory. If you can't fight the mandatory, hey, guess what? You're out of there. This is a criticism of the UFC with John Jones against Tom Aspinall. John Jones is basically injured, so he can't fight. So really, he should be fighting a mandatory. He's not fighting. He should vacate the crown. Now, this kind of happens in and out in boxing as well. Sometimes the time frames are all over the place. Okay, I'll get to my point because I know a lot of you kind of thinking we'll get to the point. But maybe you can read between the lines here and you can already tell what I'm thinking. The sanctioning bodies have to approve the fight, the undisputed fight. So it doesn't matter what Saudi Arabia want. It doesn't matter what they want to put on the fight. They might entice the sanctioning bodies to say, yes, sanction the fight. But it doesn't mean they will. The second thing here is that really the IBF is most likely not to sanction the fight, or they're most likely to free the bout up before the undisputed bout fight can take place. So therefore, it won't be an undisputed bout. It will be a bout in bout name only, let's say. Just like a few of these other Saudi bouts that they've put on. The one with Tyson Fury against Ngannou. I think there was another one with Jake Paul against Tommy Fury as well. There's kind of ceremonial bouts, event bouts, rather than legitimate boxing bouts. So this could just be another ceremonial event bout between the two best fighters in the world, or two best boxers in the world, who are going for this undisputed crown in name only because the likes of the IBF are not sanctioning it. So you could have a situation where the undisputed champion, Tyson Fury or Usyk, right, whoever comes out on top, they will have to vacate their bout, the IBF crown, or maybe another bout as well, and then they won't be the undisputed champion anymore. They may go for this undisputed bout because that's the fight we want to see, you know, Tyson Fury against AJ, or would it be Usyk against Ngannou for that fight, for that bout, but it won't mean anything. This is where the nonsense, the real nonsense of this is. Until the four sanctioning bodies sanction that fight within a certain time frame, then you've got a fight. But until that time, it's not happening. Now, the only way this will work, for me, the only way this will work is if the IBA give a kind of an extension, a stay of execution. Because if AJ wins, right, against Ngannou, he still won't be the IBF number one unless the IBF change their rankings. The IBF have to get AJ as number one and Hrgovic as number two. That's why after the Day of Reckoning on the 23rd of December, when AJ won, it was supposed to be that he was going to go for the vacated IBF title and he would overtake Wallin in the IBF ranking to fight Hrgovic. Therefore, this would be his dream come true to be 3 times world champion. So that was the path. The problem was about timeframes again. Would the IBF be vacated in time for AJ to fight at the end of the Riyadh season? And that's where the question was, to say, well, is he going to be able to fight for the IBF bout in the meantime? Now, he's thinking, I've got to go for the money. I've also got to keep myself active as well. The attraction of fighting for Saudi, or the pull to fight for Saudi, I'm sure from Eddie Hearn as well, has been very, very strong as well. So it seems as if they put that IBF crown on the back burner. Okay, here is another problem that maybe nobody has really thought about. Francis Ngannou is only in the WBC rankings. He was given that ceremoniously, if you like, after the Tyson Fury fight. Okay, you could say, well, he kind of deserved it because he went toe-to-toe with Tyson Fury. I don't have an issue with that. Many people do. I don't have an issue. I think it's a bit of a stretch, but I can see why they've done it. But to my knowledge, so far today, at the time of this video being recorded, the other 3 sanctioning bodies have not put Francis Ngannou within their rankings. Certainly the IBF. Therefore, Francis Ngannou, if he beats AJ, he cannot legitimately go for the undisputed crown. against Tyson Fury because he's not in the IBF rankings. Now, could the IBF, if Francis Ngannou win, could they bring him into the IBF rankings? Well, again, to put him straight in at number one, I don't think there's any precedent for that. I don't think that's ever been done. He would have to fight a few tune-up fights in the IBF rankings to get to that number one slot. I would say he would have to fight Hrgovic to be number one ranking, therefore he could go for the Undisputed. Hopefully you can see where I'm coming from here. The idea of the Undisputed bout is great, don't get me wrong. But unless the sanctioning bodies, especially the IBF, sanction this and allow this, then it only works with AJ against Fury or AJ against Usyk. It doesn't work with Ngannou. And maybe that's why Turki Al-Sheikh said, I don't want Ngannou to win. Because maybe they already know this. Maybe this is what they're thinking. They're thinking, we can't really... It's not going to work. It's not going to work if the IBF don't play ball. Now, I'm saying this as if the IBF are going to stand their ground and say, no, the mandatory has to be fought. Right now, that's Hrgovic. He has to fight for the vacated IBF crown or title. Who's number two? It's AJ. Those two have to fight each other. If they don't, then we're going to go to the third and fourth. They'll fight for it, and they'll be the IBF champion. So this is where the big sticking point is for me. Not only is it about timeframes and when are these fights going to happen, and is this just a wish list that isn't really realistic? Is this more like a ceremonial bout because it is just a wish list? And it all depends whether the IBF and the other sanctioning bodies, but primarily the IBF, will allow it, will allow this to happen. I'm not so sure it will, because we've been talking about the IBF the whole time with AJ and Hrgovic ever since, well, for me, before December 23rd. So all of a sudden we forgot about that. Now, if we've forgotten about that in terms of world titles for AJ, that's fine, because he's going after 50 million. He's getting 50 million for this fight with Ngannou. I think Ngannou's getting 25 million. Fine. I don't have an issue with that. But if you're expecting them to go for an Undisputed afterwards, it kind of depends well what the authorities say, if they're going to allow it or not. I would not be surprised in the coming month or so that you see some shenanigans within the rankings, within the IBF rankings. I would not be surprised if they put Ngannou in all the rankings, all the WBA, WBO, IBF rankings to join the WBC rankings. I would not be surprised. I would also not be surprised if Ngannou beats AJ, which is a real possibility, right? That he is put forward as a number one or number two contender in one of those rankings. And especially one of the rankings that are going to make a mandatory vacation of that bout. So basically, you'll have Ngannou with an IBF title, let's say, and then you'll have Fury or Usyk with the other three bouts, and they'll fight each other. If they don't, if none of that happens, then essentially it's going to be another competitive exhibition ceremonial fight. I'm not saying, it's an exhibition fight that they're not really going to go for it. Of course, people misunderstood this when I said this before, but it will be competitive. They will be going for it, but nothing will be on the line. That's what I mean. Nothing will be on the line officially. So then, again, this throws up another bit of information, right? This throws up another question. If they go for this Undisputed bout, the ceremonial bout, and they have it, and whoever wins, Ngannou, Tyson Fury, Usyk, AJ, whoever wins that fight, right, they will be called the Undisputed Heavyweight Boxing Champion of the World. In name only. In name only. Because if the sanctioning bodies all don't agree to it, then you can have the fight. You can fight who you want. And you can call yourself whatever you want. But then you'll have two undisputed champions, essentially. You could do. You could have what the sanctioning bodies authorize, approve, and it's what the Saudi Arabia sanctioning body or events team, what they want to call the Undisputed as well. Again, more nonsense, more incredulity, more kind of head scratching, whatever word you want to use. It's a little bit it's a little bit of a question that nobody seems to have asked. So this is why I'm here, to ask these questions and see what you think. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Am I being disrespectful, as I've been called so far? Am I being, negative, as I've been called before? Or am I talking sense? Or am I just asking the questions that people haven't really asked, but maybe they should be asking? And maybe these are the questions that you'll hear in the coming weeks when more and more people start dissecting this and actually, what does it really mean? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you like what I do here, don't forget to like and share the video. Subscribe to the channel and hit the notifications bell for all future videos. Don't forget to check out the RevelatorAlf podcast on Spotify. And I will catch you again on another video coming very soon. Bye now. RevelatorAlf. A Harley Davidson prices going down. Let's get into it. Hello, welcome to RevelatorAlf. I hope you're all well. If you like what I do here, don't forget to like and share the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notifications bell for all future videos. And go check out the RevelatorAlf podcast on Spotify as well. So, this video is dedicated to Harley Davidson and their prices for 2024. Are they coming down? So, here's what's been happening. Now, there have been reports recently that the models for 2024, those that have not yet been released, those that will be revealed this coming week on January 24th for their product launch for Harley Davidson, the Tourer lineup, those motorcycles are going to be reduced in price. So I wanted to do a little bit of digging to see, well, what is going on with the prices overall. Now, I've got to make this distinction between the American prices or Canadian prices or any other country's prices and those that are happening to UK. So I'm only going to talk about UK prices. So you're going to have to look at your own country's prices and see where you're at. Now, we know that Harley Davidson gets a bit of a bashing, just like a lot of other automotive manufacturers, for their prices, right? Especially the ones that are producing bikes, in Harley Davidson's case, at a higher price, right? So they always get a bashing. And some would say it's fair game, and others would say, well, it's a little bit too critical. So I get that. So this is not really a criticism of Harley Davidson. It's more like a statement of facts, okay? They do sell, some of their bikes are really, really expensive. Some of them are expensive, but not so expensive. But certainly you could say they're a lot more expensive than other motorcycle manufacturers that are producing similar kinds of motorcycles. Not necessarily their direct competitors, but you could say there are cheaper alternatives out there. So we know that. That's not news. But the question is, will they be producing motorcycles in 2024 that are a lot more expensive than they were in 2023? Okay, I've done a bit of digging. So let's just say in the United States, the Nightster and the Nightster Special have actually come down in price. Well, actually here in the UK, they've gone up in price. The Nightster has gone up at 2.7% and the Nightster Special has gone up at 3.57%. So all I would say is, whilst there are price rises, they'd still be in line with inflation for me. So they're not exorbitant price rises. They are kind of what I would expect in all fairness. Whilst I don't agree with it, whilst I would say they are too expensive for what they are, and all those other kind of negatives, I would say actually as a positive, it's kind of in line with inflation, right? In fact, you could argue that they're lower than many inflation levels around the world, right? Okay, so that's the Nightsters. The Sportster S also gets a 2.29 increase in price as well. So again, in line with inflation or even just below inflation. It's not the price reduction or the price freeze that I would like, but again, you know, it's to be expected, I would say. Now, I'm not going to go through all the motorcycles that Harley Davidson have already released for 2024 and compare those prices to 2023. Well, I've done that, but I'm not going to tell you that. They all operate in the 1.5 to 3%-ish price increase. Okay, so that's where we're at. However, there are some notable exceptions, and this is where we've got to start thinking about these new prices that might be coming out for the 2024 launch models. Will they come down in price? Okay, so every motorcycle has got this 1.5 to 3% increase, apart from the Sport Glide. The Sport Glide has got a reduction of 2.23%. Woohoo! That's great, right? I'm not exactly sure why. It seems like it's a bit of an oddity here. But there we go. That is the motorcycle that has got a price reduction. Now, I'm talking about the UK prices here alone, okay? So it's just for the Sport Glide. For UK prices, that's the only Harley Davidson that has got the price reduction. The Fat Boy with the 114 engine is basically exactly the same price. There's no price increase or decrease. It's exactly the same. And guess what? The other motorcycle that has got no price increase at all or no price reduction is the Road King Special. Those are the only two motorcycles that have had no price change, and the Sport Glide is the only one with a price reduction. Now, the motorcycles that have had the highest price increase, as it were, are the Knights, the Special with a 3.57%. The Lowrider ST has gone up at 2.89%. The Breakout 117 is up at 2.48%. And the Tri-Glide Ultra is up at 2.06%. Now, the Tri-Glide Ultra is coming in at £39,595. So that's a hefty price tag there. Now, you could say that these percentage changes don't really mean a lot to the likes of you and I. It's more about actually how much extra the price is, right? That's what you're really interested in. And most kind of operate in the 350 pound price increase. That's where most of them are. The Knights, the Special has gone up £500. The Lowrider ST has gone up £600, as has the Breakout 117. That's also gone up at £600. And the Tri-Glide Ultra, that's the one that has gone up the most. That's at £800. So let's just take all that into context and talk about these new bikes that are coming out in 2024. And essentially, we're talking about the Grand Tourers, right? We're talking about the CVOs, which we in the UK don't have the prices for 2024. So we're talking about the CVOs, we're talking about the Road Glide, the Street Glide, and of course the ST models as well. Now, obviously, there could be substantial changes within those models, whether it's fairing, whether it's engine upgrades. We just don't know at this stage. There's lots of rumours, of course, and you can watch my previous videos about that. But if we're just talking about those motorcycles, will they get a price reduction? So I suppose you've got to look at the motorcycles that have already been released. And notably, the Road King Special, which has had a 0 price increase, and the Road Glide Limited, the Ultra Limited, and I suppose you could include the Trikes in here as well. They've all had price increases. So it will kind of make sense that you're going to have a price increase, or at best a price freeze, on the models on these touring models. But will it be a price reduction? I really can't see it. I really can't see there being a price reduction on those models that have also had upgrades, because this is basically what we're talking about. We're talking about those models that have been listed that are getting new fairings or engine upgrades, whether they're going for 117 options, whether they're going for variable valve timing options. They're not really going to produce those bikes for less money. I'd be very surprised if they're less money. Now, could we hope for at least a freeze on the prices? Well, again, personally, I think that's highly unlikely. But it could happen. Granted, it could happen. I suppose what is most likely that there will be a price increase, but that price increase will be in line with all the other price increases, which will be below the inflation level. So they're introducing new motorcycles, new technologies, new variants, I suppose, the best way to describe it. They're not going over the top on the price increases. So this will be a lot easier to stomach for a lot of people. In fact, you could argue that if they just increase the prices a couple of £100, dollars, shekels, whatever it is, that's not really going to put off prospective new buyers for 2024 models. The argument would be, well, why would you go and buy a 2024 bike when you can get a 2023 bike for less money, let's say, especially, as I've said before, a nearly new bike or a used bike that's, let's say, got 1,000 miles on it. Why would you spend that money on a 2024 bike? However, if the price difference between a 2024 bike and a 2023 bike, brand new, 0 miles on the clock, is only £200 or £300, $300 or $400, let's say, then you kind of think, well, yeah, I can see where lots of people would go for it. So the point of this video really is to look at the data, look at what's been happening, and really just to, I suppose, push back on those who would say, well, yeah, we're getting price decreases here. If we are, I think it's really welcome, of course. Of course you're going to welcome that. Of course you are. Is it realistic? I'm not so sure. I would be very surprised if we're going to get price reductions. Now, I've got to say this is for the UK prices, and I have been saying the whole time, I'm talking about UK prices here, and I suppose by extension European prices and global prices, okay? Because the United States prices are always cheaper. So you have a different price point and a different marketing and pricing strategy than goes on the rest of the world. So let's say the Nights and the Nights are special have come down in price in the United States, whereas here in the UK, and I haven't checked in other parts of the world and Europe, but let us know in the comments below if you have, they've actually gone up a little bit. Still only 2 or 3%, but it has gone up. Whereas in the United States, it's gone down. So could it follow suit in the United States? The prices for the new Taurus will be 0% increase, or there will be a slight reduction, let's say 1 or 2%, or will they increase in line with inflation with the rest of the price rises here at 2 or 3%? I've got a feeling it's going to be a 2 or 3% increase. I wouldn't hold my breath for a price reduction. But listen, hey, I could be completely wrong here. At this stage, I'm just looking at prices and comparing and contrasting and seeing where the most movement is likely to be. What I find really interesting was that there's no price increase for the Fat Boy or the Road King Special. And the Sport Glide actually came down in price. Now, I don't know if that's got anything to do with them not being able to sell the Sport Glide enough. They want to get rid of stock, so they just want offering it at a slightly cheaper price. I really don't know. But it's interesting that one motorcycle that I own that I've been raving about for years and years has got a slight price reduction. And it could be that they found that 2023 prices were slightly higher than they needed to be. And the 2024 price, if they added that 1.5%, 2.5%, 3% increase like all the other motorcycles, it would be too expensive for what it is. Maybe. I have no idea on that in that regard. So there you go. That's all the price increases for the existing models for 2024. Could we expect a price reduction or price freeze for the model variants that are to be announced on January 24th this week? Wishful thinking, I would say, wishful thinking. But hey, that can only be positive, right? If something does happen, if they prove me wrong and reduce the prices, that can only be a positive. At best, I think a price freeze, but a marginal price increase, I would say, is most likely. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Let us know where you're from in the world. If you've noticed what the price increases are for the existing models where you are, 2024 bikes versus 2023 bikes. Have there been any price reductions in your country where you're riding? And what are you expecting for the prices for 2024 bikes to be announced this week? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you like what I do here, don't forget to like and share the video, subscribe to the channel and hit the notifications bell for all future videos. And I will catch you again on another video coming very soon. Bye now. RevelatorAlf. A comedy podcast failing. Let's get into it. Hello, welcome to the Alf Casparo channel. I hope you're all well. If you like what I do here, don't forget to like and share the video, subscribe to the channel and hit the notifications bell for all future videos. And go check out the RevelatorAlf podcast on Spotify as well. So, this video is all about, well, I love a good comedy podcast, just like the next person, right? I go out walking my dog and I'm listening to Joe Rogan or any other of the comedy podcasts out there, and some educational ones as well. I do listen to those. But listen, I love a good old podcast, especially when I'm on my own head and I just want to be doing my own thing without distraction. Love it. Love listening to them. But are they failing? They seem to be coming under increasing criticism from a lot of people out there. And I've been seeing quite a few videos recently on YouTube where certain accounts are actually calling out a lot of these podcasts for some of the stuff that they say and some of the things that they do and the antics that they get up to as well. Now, the thing is, with a lot of the comedians, they're always talking about, I suppose, the free speech, the last great line in the sand, where we can actually say what we want to say. So they're always talking about that kind of thing. And this is why I like listening to Joe Rogan podcast so much. It's because when he's interviewing the other comedians there that he has on the show, it's really interesting to listen to their thought process about how they're putting things together and how they work and all that kind of stuff. And in the past, I've used a lot of those kind of mechanics to help me with my public speaking or making videos or anything like that, in terms of timing, in terms of cadence and all these kinds of things, right? So it's really interesting for me for that. Now, I love comedy anyway, I always have, right? But the point here is that some of these podcasts, especially the ones that have come out since or during the COVID era, the kind of internet comedians who've got really, really big, are putting out their material and their funny kind of anecdotes into the world. All of a sudden, they're getting a bit of backlash. Matt Rife was one from the United States recently. Yeah, really funny as well. But his female audience, predominantly female audience, kind of turned against him in this kind of cancel culture nonsense when he put out his Netflix special. When he's made a funny joke. Now, I've got to say, I thought it was okay, his comedy special, but I didn't think it was fantastic. One of the problems that I find with a lot of the comedians and the comedy podcasts, especially the American ones, is that the stories get lost in translation a little bit. Because sometimes, especially on the Joe Rogan show, he'll be talking about things that are particular to United States of America in terms of politics, in terms of names. And a lot of comedians do that as well. They're talking about individual things that they know very well, but maybe us in the UK or around the world don't know. So we can see the humour. Of course, we're not thick, right? We can see what's funny, but at the same time, if we don't know the backstory, the context, it's a little bit, as opposed to a big belly laugh, right? So I get it. I get that there's a loss in translation sometimes. But I think sometimes a lot of the comedians, they kind of get ahead of themselves. And then when they're talking with other comedians as well, there's a bit of bickering amongst themselves. And this has been happening quite a lot as well. Now, very recently, a very well-known comedian from the United States who's been in quite a few films as well, many films actually over the years, Cat Williams, right? He went on a kind of video podcast and the Shay show, and he basically started calling out everybody, all these other comedians. Now, again, this is where I talk about this kind of lost in translation a little bit. I've seen Cat Williams shows as well, and I thought they were really funny as well. But it still comes down to they're funny, but they're not that funny because there's a lot of context that kind of escapes us because we don't really know it, right? But then there's been a backlash against him from American comedians. So you can't say that, you can't do that, you can't do that. There's been quite a few YouTube accounts calling out these comedians and all these comedy podcasts with what they're saying. And they're using some of their material to highlight where they've gone wrong. These comedians then have put a community strike against these YouTube channels and made a copyright claim against them as well, saying you're stealing my material or using my material, as opposed to just kind of taking it in good fun, or maybe just realizing, you know what, I was a bit of a dick there. Maybe, somebody's calling me out. All right, fair enough. Shame on me. But no, they're kind of taking it out on them as well, especially when you're talking about these are the purveyors of free speech and free thought and going against the regime, going against the man. All of a sudden now, they're not allowing other people to go against them or go against the comedy system, as it were. So the question is, well, are people just getting a bit fed up of it? Now, I saw a video the other day where they were talking about the Andrew Schultz comedy podcast and Flagrant and some of the other things that he was doing as well, and how he's grown as well. And it's just picking holes in what they were doing. Now, I know it's easy to pick holes in any performer's act or what they do or their career and everything like that. You can pick holes in anything. And crikey, I've been doing it for years as well. You can pick holes. You can say, did they really say that? Did he really mean that? Hey, what about if he said that? Then obviously this doesn't apply to this. So there's lots of things that we can use that kind of we can twist and make it into another story. Now, sometimes we make that into a bit of a comedy sketch. Sometimes it's a bit of anecdotal spin. Sometimes it's just a bit of a wry look on the world. But essentially, you can take what anybody says and twist it a little bit. So I'm sure there's a lot of that. I'm sure there's a lot of people thinking, well, hold on a minute. We don't think you're that funny and we're going to hold you account a little bit. So I think there's a little bit of play on both sides. But the interesting thing here was the likes of Joe Rogan goes from strength to strength to strength. Just massive, right? And he's got his own comedy venue where he lives now in Austin, which he's developed as well. So it's all great. It's all great. A lot of others have jumped on the bandwagon in this kind of podcast frenzy of the last few years as well. They've realized that actually they don't have to go on the road. They can deliver their act, let's say, online. They can deliver their act online and never really have to do anything. They can get guests in and they can just have a fun show and then just use the likes of YouTube and Spotify and what we as YouTubers would try and build up as income generation. They know that they can do it from that, and some of them have done it very, very well. But they can only go so far. they can only go so far where people kind of get a bit bored. And I've seen this in my own content before, and I've seen this in projects that I've been involved with before. People will stick with you for a certain period. It could be 4 or 5 years, 3 years, and then they'll find something else. They'll start to find something else. So if you don't grow, if you grow in a way that they're not really liking, then also you get a bit of a generational gap as well. Your initial fan base will grow with you, but then they might start leaving. But because you've gone off in a bit of a tangent that is driving away your original audience, you're also failing to attract your new audience as well. So all of a sudden your numbers start to dip. This is what they're saying about certain YouTubers out there, or certain podcasters and comedy podcasts. Actually, the numbers are coming down. Now, I'm not saying this is an early indication that these comedy podcasts are going to fail or they're going to go on and do something else. But it just seems to me that some who are just purely focused on the majority of their work is purely online, and they're not getting out on the comedy circuit, let's say, and traveling all over the place, they're missing out on something. Whereas those comedians who are still working and still doing it, yes, doing a bit of online stuff, but they're still out there actively getting out there and honing their craft or coming out with new material. Those are the ones who are going to be, front and center in your minds in the coming years. And the ones that have kind of got a bit carried away with themselves, those are the ones that are going to fall by the wayside. Now, this kind of problem that they're facing, but also, let's say, a double standard that many are accusing them of, was kind of illustrated to me in a recent podcast which I heard and I saw with True Geordie, who I watch quite a lot here in the UK. And I don't always agree with a lot of stuff. I don't always agree with a lot of what Joe Rogan says, but it's always worth a watch, right? So that being said, I enjoy his content. And he was interviewing Akash from the Flagrant podcast from Andrew Schultz, who've come under a lot of criticism. Interesting. What he said was, he was talking about his own heritage, and he was talking about comedians making jokes about his heritage, his Indian heritage, which he didn't like or he didn't necessarily find funny. But he said what he found even more interesting, or what he found more that he didn't like, was people from his own background making fun of his background. And I just thought, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? You just seem to be closed off in this mindset that it's okay to make fun of everybody else, but you can't make fun of my background, and I don't really like other people making fun of my background as well. That's completely closed off for me. And I'm just wondering whether a lot of them feel like that. A lot of well-known comedians were notoriously arseholes in the background. I know Hicks, right? Bill Hicks was notoriously a bit of an arse. I don't know that firsthand because I just was a kid when he was doing his bits. But I've spoken to a couple of people now, and comedians who actually said, yeah, I did a set years ago, and he was a right arsehole in the background as well. So look, just because they're comedians doesn't mean they're funny on stage. It doesn't necessarily mean they're funny off stage. They could be right dickheads as well. But this Akash, this footage of him really being an arsehole to somebody in a front row once as well, who wasn't exactly enjoying himself and being great himself. But at the same time, he kind of took it way too far in criticising this person. It's just what just because somebody doesn't find you funny or is not really enjoying your show doesn't make them an arsehole. It just makes you not very good at entertaining them. But getting back to his point on the True Geordie show, he said, I don't really like it when other people are, having a go or making fun of my culture. But hold on a minute. You're missing out then on all the comedians that are in India, Bangladesh, Pakistan. There's lots of comedians on the circuit out there, especially in India. In fact, stand-up comedy in India has grown and grown and grown. And guess what? They're making fun of their own culture. But is this just Indian comics that are doing it? No. Every culture, every country that has comedians, guess what? They make fun of themselves. They make fun of their own experiences. They find funny anecdotes or funny observations in whatever they're seeing. If I take, from my heritage, an Italian background, lots of Italian-American comics, English-American comics, Italian comics, Australian Italian comics as well. All their material is all about the Italian society, the Italian community. Now, for us on the inside, as it were, it's so funny. It's amazingly funny. Those on the outside might have a little bit of this disconnect, as I was talking about, between, you know, an English person interpreting an American comedian, let's say. There is a little bit of a disconnect there if you don't really understand the context. But if you're in it, you totally get the joke. You totally get what's funny. And what are they doing? They're making fun of their own heritage. They're making fun of the situations that you find within your own community. So if every other comedian in the world doesn't have a problem with it, in fact, they actively use that, why do you have a problem with it? So this kind of thing is being highlighted by a few other commentators, let's say, out there. There's a few YouTube channels out there who are kind of talking about this. They're kind of saying, hey, look, this is a big double standard. You can't just start ragging on somebody else and, you know, and not being able to take it yourself. A lot of these podcasts are getting guests on, whether they're just normal guests or whether they're comedians, and they're kind of ambushing them with stuff that, you know, it doesn't make sense. You know, they're just screaming louder and louder and louder, getting more and more aggressive and more offensive, let's say, in the name of comedy, but they can't take it themselves. As soon as the roles are reversed, as soon as the tables are turned, all of a sudden they're not liking it so much. So this is a criticism of these comedians, especially the ones that have blown up in the last few years. And this is why a lot of the numbers are starting to fall away, where their fan base is starting to get a little bit fed up of it. They're kind of walking away and they're choosing something else, and they're not attracting the new fan base. Now, we've got to say, their numbers are still really, really good. So I can't say it's all doom and gloom. And maybe the observations that have been made are a little bit that, you know, they're digging a bit too deep. They're seeing something that isn't really there. Or maybe there is something there. We just don't know. But the fact of the matter is, if you're throwing stones at somebody, guess what? You're going to have a few thrown back at you as well. That's the nature of the beast. You can't just hide behind, oh, I'm a comedian on stage, it's all fun. Well, guess what? Other people can be a comedian as well, and they can throw a few stones at you as well. That's just the way it works. That's just life. That's just society. You're there to entertain. Well, yes, entertain. But guess what? Other people can be entertainers, and they can poke fun at you as well. That's just the way it is. So there's probably been a little bit of a backlash against a lot of these podcasts. I think podcasts in general have grown exponentially over the years, but maybe there's a little bit of a pushback on all of these podcasts because you just don't know how many are out there. There's millions of them all over the world. And you're thinking, well, it's just a little bit like YouTube. There's so many YouTube channels and so many YouTube videos. You say, well, who do you choose, right? So I think a lot of people have seen that many people, especially comedians, have jumped onto this podcast bandwagon, and yeah, they've been quite successful. Some of them, most haven't, but some of them have, and they're just kind of wondering, well, is it really funny anymore? And maybe that's what a lot of what Cat Williams was saying as well, that the likes of Joe Rogan, he's just getting on these, a small group of regular guests, regular comedians who are never funny. They're not really that funny. I kind of disagree. I think they're pretty funny, but again, not necessarily to my taste. But then again, I don't think Joe Rogan is necessarily big belly laugh to me as well. Not all the time. Sometimes he is, and sometimes his routines are, but not always. So I think there's the split there. You've got a split amongst comedians as well. I don't think they've ever really liked each other in truth as well. I don't think it's just one big happy family. You know, they compete with each other, don't they? They kind of, they get jealous of each other's success. Look, that happens all the time. So it's not one big happy family. So I wouldn't be surprised if more is coming out of this, if more develops in the coming months or the next year or two, where you'll see these big names that start to come under increasing criticism, or they actually change their ways a little bit and they kind of admit a few failings or commit acts of contrition, whatever the term is, just to kind of improve themselves a little bit, evolve a little bit, and just come out with really good material, but also don't take themselves too seriously. And that seems a bit of an interesting one, isn't it? You're a comedian, but you kind of take yourself too seriously. You're a little bit too sensitive of what other people are saying about you. But there we go. You know, are they all snowflakes, or should they just grow a pair? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. But are comedy podcasts failing, and where will they be in the future? Let us know your thoughts. Don't forget to like and share the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notifications bell for all future videos. And go check out the RevelatorAlf podcast on Spotify as well. And I'll catch you again. Bye now.